Hey guys, in this video we're doing lesson 2.2, which is domain and range. And just two important vocabulary terms. The first one is domain, and that is a list of all the x values. So we literally list out all of the x's. There are two rules to this. Number one, we list the numbers from smallest to largest. So you don't always list them in the order that you see them. You list them smallest to largest. And the second rule is that you only write a number once. So if the same number shows up more than once, then you don't have to write it twice. Once you've written a number, you don't write that number again. So for example, let's list the domain, and that is all of your x values. So if we have a table or a mapping, it's extremely easy to see. So you will usually see your answers written in these curly brackets. I know they're hard to draw. You don't have to draw them. You can leave them off. So if we look at our x's, the smallest one is -1, then 0, then 4, then 5, and then 6. So it's just all of those x's listed out. If you take a guess, you can probably assume that the range is all of the y values. And that's correct. The range, you have the same rules as the domain. Same rules. So for example, all of our y's, the smallest one is -9, then -8, and it might help you to cross them off as you go. -5, -2, and then 3. And that's all it is. So let's look at example number 1. We're going to list out the domain and the range and then say if it's a function or not. So the domain, all of our x's, -3, 0, 2, and 5. Remember, we list them from least to greatest. The range, the smallest number of my y's is 2, 6, 7. I have 2 7s, but I don't need to write them twice. Once will do. And then, is it a function? Well, we look at our x values. Since they're all different, none of the x's repeat. Yes, it's a function. If you feel pretty good about this, I want you to pause the video and try number 2, and then you can play the video once you have it figured out. For domain, you should have wrote -1, 1, and 8. And the range, 2, 3, 4, 5. And no, it is not a function because the x's repeat. Okay. The mapping, same thing. Domain are our x's, -6, -1, 5, 7, and the range, -9, 2, 3. And yes, it is a function. If I look at all the x's, each one only has one arrow coming from it. So that's how I know that none of the x's repeat. So yes, it's a function. Pause the video and see if you can answer number 4. Your domain is -8, 4, 6, and your range is -5, 0, 1, 6. And no, it is not a function because this -8 has 2 arrows, so that means you have -8, -5, and -8, 6, those 2 points. Now, regular Algebra 2, this is the end of your notes. However, don't stop here because I want to show you an example that was not on the notes that I should have included. So I'm going to make up an example with a graph. So just bear with me here. If you can find a place to write this, that would be good. Let's say that we have a graph with 3 points on there. And I ask you to find the domain and the range. What we're going to do is, first of all, you have an option. You could write out the coordinates. For example, this is the point 1, 2. This is the point 3, -1. And this is the point -3, -3. So from here, I can just write down my 3 x values for domain and the 3 y values for range. Or you could just kind of take it point by point. For the domain, this point has an x value of -3. So you can just look. You don't have to write out the points. This one has an x value of 1. And this one has an x value of 3. For the range, this one has a y value of -3. This one has a y value of -1. And this one has a y value of 2. So when you see just individual points, you just list out the x's and the y's. Just like you did before, you're just looking at a different picture. If you have any questions on this, make sure to let me know. So if you're in regular Algebra 2, you can stop here. The rest of you have a few more questions. And these are graphs, but they're not just individual points. Instead, we have some points that are connected with lines. And so every point along these lines would be included. So there is no way that we could actually just single list out every single point. So we use something called interval notation. And that's where we're going to have like 2 numbers with a parenthesis in between them, or not a comma. Okay. And then we'll either use brackets or a parenthesis. So a bracket is used, well, let's start with the parenthesis is used if you see an open circle, that's where you use a parenthesis. Everything else you use a bracket. So sometimes you'll see a closed point. Sometimes it'll just be the line will just be there. You won't see the actual point. But if you see the open circle, you for sure use a parenthesis. Okay. So I'll show you what that means. So the numbers that we write down, those are our starting and ending numbers. So for the domain, we're going to look at our starting x. So the farthest, so domain is left, comma, right. So we're going to see the farthest left we can go. And the farthest left is this point right here, which is at -4. So we write down -4. And this point was a closed circle. So we used a bracket. If that circle wasn't there and the line just stopped there, I would still use a bracket. And then this is the farthest right that it goes. That's at +4. And it's a closed point. As long as you don't see a hole, an open circle, you use a bracket. So range would be bottom, comma, top. So the farthest that this graph goes down is right here, which is -2, comma, and then the farthest up it goes is right here, which is 4. And is this a function? Yes, it is, because it passes the vertical line test. If you're confused on that part, you need to go back to the last video. Number 6, so domain, the farthest left it goes is -3, and the farthest right it goes is 1. The range, the farthest it goes on the bottom is -4, and the farthest it goes to the top is 0. Is it a function? Yes. I want you to pause the video and try numbers 7 and 8 on your own. So for number 7, the farthest left it goes is -3, and the farthest right is +3. For the range, the bottom is -2, and the top is 4. Now on that one, you don't see a closed circle, but we still use a bracket because it's definitely not a hole. It was not like this. This would have been a hole. If you don't see an open circle, you assume that it is a closed point, so bracket. And yes, it's a function. And number 8, the domain. So left, it would be -5 to 1. And then the range, -3 to 1. And no, it is not a function because it does not pass the vertical line test. If you are confused about any of this, please don't hesitate to email me and ask for clarification.